is being held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact a business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask Stacy to call the roll.
Before I start the roll call, just a quick reminder that due to the nature of virtual meetings, we will need you to state your name before speaking during this meeting. This will help us keep an accurate public record. For roll call, from Stafford County, Cindy Shelton. Cindy, do we still have you on the line?
Yes.
That's okay. Cindy Shelton. Mark Dudenheffer.
Here.
Crystal Vanucci.
Here.
Matthew Kelly.
Here.
William Withers.
Here.
Tim Baruti.
Here.
Tim McLaughlin.
Here.
Chris Yakubowski.
Here.
Deborah Frazier.
Here.
Charles Steigerwald. Marcy Parker.
Here.
Ann Kupka. Ann Kupka.
Here. Here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann. Nancy Long.
Here.
Nancy Long. Thank you, Nancy. Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Holland. Susan Gardner.
Here.
Todd Horsley. Cedric Rush. David McLaughlin.
Here.
Ivan Rucker. That concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Stacy. Item number 4 is the approval of the May 18th, 2020 Policy Committee agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I've got a motion to approve, Shelton.
And a second?
Second, McLaughlin.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. If you are opposed, please state your name. Any abstentions? All right. We will move on to public involvement. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's my understanding, Adam, do we have any written comments to read to the board?
I'll ask Stacy if she has any written comments.
Oh, Stacy, do you have any written comments?
We have not received any written comments or any requests to speak. You might want to check to make sure we don't have someone on the line.
Okay. Is there anybody on the line wishing to speak to the board for public comment? All right, hearing none, we will conclude the public comment portion of the meeting. Chairman's comments. Just glad to see everybody and everybody's safe. We will leave it at that. Consent agenda, which is basically the approval of the March 16, 2020 Policy Committee meeting minutes. Chair will entertain a motion. Don't everybody jump at once.
Move for approval.
Do I have a second? Okay, moved to second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Please state your name. Any abstentions? All right. Move on to item 8, action discussion items. Item 8A, FAMPO Transportation Planning Board TPB Memorandum of Understanding MOU update. Dr. Millsaps, you're on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you know, we have you all as FAMPO Policy Committee, as a part of a certification review, was informed that we needed to update a series of documents that govern the relationship primarily between the Washington, D.C. Area Transportation Planning Board and the FAMPO organization, the Policy Committee, and the FAMPO staff. What you have before you is the more complicated, candidly, of those documents, which is why this is currently not up for a vote yet, but wanted to give you kind of an update where we were. You will recall way back when we met at VDOT, you all requested a subcommittee look at this with representatives from all 3 of the MPO organizations. And so that included Mr. Kelly, Ms. Shelton, and Paul Agnello for Spotsylvania, as well as myself, Adam, and our attorney, Eric Gregory, met and went through this document line by line, literally line by line, in great detail. And I think it's fair to say everyone at that session shared their comments at that time. Some of the overarching concerns that I think everybody shared was that there was a lot of language in here that probably wasn't entirely necessary to be a part of the document. When I asked the TPB folks about that, their answer was their attorneys prefer to have more documentation, more kind of history in these types of documents. I will tell you, the attorney that we use, Eric Gregory, kind of feels like the only thing that needs to be in a contract or an agreement are the things that are actually a part of the contract or agreement. So it's kind of up to you all where you fall out on that. I think there was also some discussion that some of this felt a little paternalistic and subordinate in some ways between the 2 organizations. So the group made several wordsmithing changes to try to equalize the relationship a little bit. And then there were a couple of specific places where there were some concerns, and so those have all been included in the comments here. Of course, there is kind of a larger overarching issue about the funds that come to our region into FAMPO as a result of having the North Stafford area in FAMPO as opposed to in the TPB. And so the folks from Stafford indicated, and Ms. Shelton, of course, is on the phone, or on the screen, so she can help you with this, but that she felt pretty strongly about we needed to have some of the language related to that relationship included in this document. I'm not sure that that piece is completed yet, candidly. I'm sure that's part of the ongoing conversation. But what you have before you are the recommendations of that subcommittee without addressing that particular issue. And I want to give Jason and the legal staff in Stafford, as well as our attorney, credit for taking a lot of varying notes from that meeting and turning them into a draft document. So again, this is for your review, but does not require a vote tonight. And Mr. Chair, I don't know if any of the committee members who are on want to comment beyond that.
Let me just start it off with a quick comment. One, I would like the board members to take a look at this in the next week or 2 and start making some comments so we can keep this discussion going. That's one. So Linda, I'm assuming we want to try to bring this back at our next meeting if all possible. And I'd rather not just go to what we've gone through in the discussions up to this point. So take the time to read this and let's start getting the comments out so we can get into the next meeting and be able to make some concrete moves as opposed to getting into a whole lot of discussion that we've gotten into before. That's one. 2, I fully understand one of the key issues, and we might touch on this later, is Stafford's request that this document in some way be better in qualifying the use of those funds, and or should I say use the word process, and documenting the process in which those funds would be allocated. And if you remember at our last meetings, we delegated part of that aspect of it to our staffs at the staff level to mull that over between Spotsy, Stafford, and Fredericksburg and come back with some thoughts and recommendations. So I know that's still an ongoing process too. And I'm hoping we'll be able to bring that forward also. And then I think once we have some wording that we to look at and proposals coming out of staff, we'll be in a better position to see how that fits into this document. Because again, there's been some discussion that the process piece can be a separate piece. That could be an agreement between FAMPO and Stafford County. It does not necessarily, it can be alluded to in this document, but it doesn't need to be spelled out. But that would be a discussion for another day, but we still need the wording in place to have that discussion on exactly how these fundings will be dealt out. And I'm hoping we'll have that conversation at the next meeting. Okay. Who would like to anybody would like to chime in? If you could please just state your name first come, first serve. No comments. So what? Going twice?
Mr. Chairman, this is
Cindy, go ahead.
yeah, thank you. I really want other people to comment, so I really appreciate you, Matt, encouraging other people to do it, because we've had the subcommittee, we talked about it a lot. And so I think everyone here understands Stafford's position. Linda, I do, so I'm not going to restate it, but I just wanted to underscore our request that the entire committee look at this and understand this part of it, because there's only that one little part left. And I just think we're so close that, you know, I don't want to continue to inject my personal thoughts on it, but understanding that Stafford wants to be well represented in this document, because frankly, it's because of us that we're doing this. And yeah, I don't want to go into all that. So forget that part. Just please, please look at this, look for any differences we have, because we want to get this done. And thank you.
Any other comments? All I'm going to ask is if you can get your comments in within the next 2 weeks, so we have time to review them and not going right into a meeting and have new stuff hit us at the last minute. I think we all want to be able to look at something and have the time to look at it before we go into the next meeting. So if you've got any comments, concerns, or additions, deletions, if you can get them to staff get them to Adam. You're the point man now, Adam. Within the next 2 weeks, that would be great, so we can start incorporating them and have a good meeting and hopefully get this off the table at our next meeting. All right, with that, we will move on to 8B, allocation of FY26 congestion mitigation air quality funding update. Mr. Nelson, as the technical committee chair, you're on.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry, Mr. Kelly, can we jump back just real quick to 8AI? We've got one more action item there, Mr. Kelly, before we jump to 8B.
Oh, performance-based planning program PPP letter. I'm sorry.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I think that also falls in my bailiwick. And so what you see before you is another document that we have to do per the certification review. The previous document, our requirement was to update and come to a new agreement. We have apparently not had this agreement in place before with the TPB. And so it is something that is important that we have done. And so essentially it is an agreement for FAMPO and the TPB to work together, to commit to work together on the federally required performance-based planning and programming process. It is primarily committing the staff to work together to do certain things related to data and data collection and have some type of communication every month, some of those kind of things all outlined here. This agreement is very similar to the agreement that the TPB has with several other jurisdictions. Just for some reason, this never got done before. Typically, this is signed between the staff head of the TPB, Conti, and the staff head of the MPO. In this case, there was a suggestion one of the suggestions we got earlier is that this should actually be signed between Mr. Conti and the chair of FAMPO. So you will see this now reflects a signature line for Mr. Kelly. In addition, Ms. Shelton had some corrections which have also been included in this. This document actually came with those 2 revisions from the TPB, so they are aware of these items that have been changed. And so this is something where we do need an action item for you to, if you approve, to have Mr. Kelly sign and approve this document. Thank you.
Point I'd make on this document, to condense it for Tim, is basically this is a process and communication document. It is not a policy document. It is how we will work together. There's not on what policies or anything beyond that. Strictly a working document. So Chair will entertain a motion, unless there's any. First, I'll entertain a motion, and we'll open up for comments and questions.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve Shelton.
All right, do I have a second?
Second, Withers.
All right, any discussion or comments on the document?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
Mark
McNevers.
I would just, Lindy, you said that this is similar to letters from other planning districts and NPOs. Could you get us a couple of copies just to view to see the similarities?
Yes, I will be happy to do that. I think they've already sent me a couple of others, so I'll look through my inbox and forward those to you. If not, I believe Lynn is probably listening in tonight, and if not, we'll make sure we get you one way or another.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please state your name. Any abstentions, please state your name. All right, motion passes. Okay, Mr. Nelson, sorry for that interruption. You're back on CMAQ.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of FAMPO. Clearly, this is something of interest to the entire organization. Just some brief background: the staff from the respective jurisdictions have been meeting about the concerns that Stafford has expressed, and we've made some good progress in reviewing what we have done previously and coming up with ideas to tweak the process. And so we're looking to get that done, to get something to the policy committee so that adoption of a revised policy can be done by the end of this year. That's just background. That process is going very well. But for the current projects, of course, we had the existing process which we used. It's a good process, so we don't think that the results are bad, but we did go through the various submittals, and to keep it simple this year, each jurisdiction has submitted one project for CMAQ funding. The Spotsylvania County has submitted Route 208, Lafayette Boulevard, and Route 1. Stafford County has submitted a project for Onville Road, and City of Fredericksburg submitted a bike ped project alongside US Route 1. I don't think I'll go into all the little details here, but there has been some back and forth on these and some tweaking, making sure that the jurisdictions agree with the scoring that took place. We're all essentially on the same page. And so the results, as you can see, you have the Route 208 project scored the highest, then was the Onville Road project, and then of course the city's bike ped. This is, again, using the existing process. And what we will do over the next several weeks is we will actually make a recommendation for the allocation of actual dollar amounts to put on these projects. So the jurisdictional staff has been working well together, and we're moving along to get this taken care of. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Again, this is the scoring. We have yet to allocate the actual or recommend allocation of actual dollars.
All right, any questions from the board? Going once, going twice. All right, then I guess we move on to item B2, which is CMAQ RSTP allocation update.
Right. We have been looking at the allocations, the way these funds have been used, and we tend to agree with the policy committee that we really need to be strategic and effective in allocating these funds. There's not enough funding in RSTP and CMAQ to actually do significant amounts of construction, but so we look at ways, some projects can be done with these funds, others, this funding helps us to leverage additional funding, such as putting together things that will help in a smart scale application. So, but we do recognize that really the overriding concern is to get infrastructure on the ground. And in this instance, we looked through the various projects, and at the top of the list, we went through several, and what we looked to do was to reallocate funds so that we actually are getting these funds onto projects or onto something that will leverage a project. And so the very first one is the regionally significant projects. That goes back to the old the outer connector discussion. Those funds can be repurposed to actual projects. That's a significant amount of RSTP money. The LRTP support we kept because that plan has yet to be completed, and so that needs to be continued. Public involvement, the carryover we limited again so that those funds can be used elsewhere. GW Ride Connect, we want to make sure we support that, but again, there's a certain amount that can be carried over. The commuter parking spaces, again, that's a known amount, and so the carryover, essentially we were identified a lot of carryovers that could be repurposed for other uses. And then that took us down to the Gateway Boulevard extension. That's a VDOT study that has been completed. And then the last one we really looked at was the Lafayette Boulevard Fredericksburg Station access study, and the second part of that study is to look at the configuration of Lafayette Boulevard, and so that will begin in June. So essentially, we repurposed these funds, and you will see that in the UPWP that you'll see later this evening. And those are, again, we're trying to be effective with these funds and to get them where they will do the most good for the region. Be happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Ms. Shelton?
Yeah, how much unallocated FAMPO CMAQ funding is available to allocate to new projects for both the previous and future years? Do you have an answer to that? I think I asked you that, Ms. Millsaps, earlier, but I didn't particularly ask this person.
I don't have that specific number. I mean, certainly I could figure it out. What we were finding mostly is RSTP money that could be reused, but I don't have the specifics or the specific total.
Well, I'll take those specifics. How about the STBG RSTP money is available to allocate to new projects? What is how much unallocated is available?
Well, if we reallocate, I mean, we're looking at some pretty significant numbers. We're looking at RSTP over $1 million. The unallocated CMAQ certainly is, the FY26 is hanging out there, and that's that's over $2 million. So it's a significant amount of funding to be used.
I was specifically referring to carryover, but I get the point for things that are not allocated in the future.
Right. Again, I haven't tallied them up, but it looks like over $1.5 million.
Mr. Chair, this is Linda, if you'd like me
Yes.
to help out a little bit.
Linda, you still on?
Yes,
There you
yes,
go.
sir, I am. Sorry, that was not me. The noise you would hear from my house would be the dog, so that wasn't me. If I might, Mr. Kelly, so I can answer particularly the carry forward question, and then of course there are old funds that really Susan at VDOT's probably the best person to give the numbers there, if I might. But in terms of what we put in our request to VDOT, in terms of CMAQ, the carry forward would be $67,000 and change. PL funding is 126.7 thousand. 5303 from the current year would be 128.8 thousand. And those are the two. The PL and the 5303 are things that we specifically need to have the policy committee decide, and also VDOT. Then the other items are more up to just the policy committee. The remaining items is the 2050 LRTP. We're requesting reprogramming of $268.8 thousand. Public involvement, almost $4 thousand. Bike ped, a little over 5,000. Lafayette Boulevard, 160, almost 161. That regionally significant project bucket that Eric mentioned is 697,000. And then you had put money in your budget for a smart scale tool that you decided not to purchase for 75. So that brings you from all of those, just 21 carry forwards of about $1.647 million. And then, you know, whatever else is there from other things, but that's the current potential carry forward. I can send this to everybody if you'd like.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I wish you could send that out and broken out, because so what you're telling me, there is $1.65 million available from prior years to move forward in the FY21 budget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and currently that has not been allocated to any particular project?
Well, that is when in the last meeting when we were talking about the GWRC budget, a portion of that, particularly the PL and 5303 funds, our proposal was to allocate that for staffing, allocate a portion of the public involvement to staffing, but overall the amount that we were suggesting to be used for staffing for 21 would be obviously significantly less than this.
So let me, just because having been on Chair GWRC, for those who weren't on the meeting earlier, I had a concern about moving, it was 280,000 or so of prior year money to fund staff salaries, I understand, for the most part, in FY21. So it's as if we're supplementing a future budget with past money. I don't think that's the appropriate way to do it. I think the FY21 budget should be used to fund FY21 work. Any of these prior year money should be allocated towards construction or something that not staffing, because I think we're setting ourselves up for a future failure. So if you could, Mr. Chair, if you could have us all sent out all of these funds and where they can be spent and how, you know, where are they authorized to be spent by category?
Okay, I don't have a problem doing that, but just understand one thing. Some of these funds are specifically for planning, which involves staffing. And what we're trying to do is not increase staff. There's so many pockets of money that we've been pulling from for different things. And now we're trying to get it all centralized back to where it really should be in the first place, which is planning money going to staffing, et cetera, RSDP, CMAQ going to project.
And I agree with that. And I think that's, but based on what's available in FY21, you should implement that program. So you're limiting what sources you're funding these staff out of. But the past money should not be funding future salaries. Let's put it against projects. But if you could go ahead and let us know where those funds can be spent, you know, whether it's planning or staff or whatever it may be, and let the board come up with decisions on how to best spend that money. There may be a higher priority road project or something.
don't disagree for a presentation from the standpoint of this is not anything we're asking for a decision on tonight anyway.
Yeah.
We make a presentation at the next meeting and then we can make a policy decision at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Anything
may
else?
this is Linda again. If I might, may I suggest that I augment what Mr. McLaughlin has asked us to put together, which we are certainly happy to do, with a look at, for the last several years, how much money has been expended on salary from which funding sources, budgeted and actual, so you can see kind of what the pattern is. Because we've been using historically a lot of RSTP, STBG funds to fund staff, and it's been very up and down for particular projects. So as for those of you that weren't on the earlier meeting, we were trying to kind of level out the amount of funding that would be requested, but I certainly appreciate Mr. McLaughlin's concern to make sure we have plenty of funding, that we're not just pushing forward a problem by a year. So we'll go back and provide you that background so you can make a good decision.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments on this item?
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr.
Go ahead.
Heifer.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Mr. Heifer, you haven't spoken yet. Mark, go ahead.
I'm looking at the spreadsheet, and there are substantial items of RSTP funding. And I don't think any of that money should be reallocated or allocated until we've decided exactly how we are going to disperse RSTP funding that comes from the TPB for North Stafford.
The only point I would make on that is the original discussions has been what we're going to try to do is get everything lined up for the out years with regards to whatever arrangement we make, not already take monies that have been pre-allocated, a few years ago, and then suddenly say, no, we're going to go back and now we're going to put a new formula to it. We do it, and this is a discussion for the next meeting. You got to put a line somewhere, Mark. You can't keep pushing back and reallocating funds going farther years in the back
Matt,
years.
I'm gonna disagree with that, because if you look back, there's been substantial amounts of that RSTP funding that has not gone to the people who generate the money. So to start fresh now and keep all of this money allocated out through 2026, I think is a foul, and I think it really needs to be addressed. It absolutely.
Well, the problem you got is now you're going to take projects that potentially are currently funded in Stafford, or excuse me, in Spotsylvania in the city, and saying, okay, you're being defunded, so we can shift the money over to Stafford.
Right.
That's what you're asking us to
do. Let's define funded. Okay, if the money was allocated and used for a smart scale project, I completely understand. I'm not interested in yanking money from that. But there's a lot of this money that's totally really unallocated, but it's earmarked for future projects. And I would object that this money be used for that until we've decided exactly how we are going to spend this money over the next several years, especially in light of the research that was presented, I think, at our last meeting that talked about the deficiencies in how the allocations were over the last 8 to 10 years.
All right.
I don't think we should start over.
We're not going to start that discussion all over again either. So, but
we never did resolve it. We never did resolve that issue.
Well, we're not going to resolve it tonight, so let's get it to the next meeting, and then we'll have that discussion. That partly goes also into our agreement with the TPB and the process moving forward anyway. And that's what we're waiting for the staff to come up with, so we have something to look at and have this discussion. So, Cindy, did you want to chime in?
Mark said it very well. So I'm looking forward to seeing our next meeting so we can discuss this as well. And
all right.
Yeah, I think all the ideas that we have work. And so Ms. Millsap's idea of consolidating and cleaning up our PL lines, I think makes sense, that we have less accounts and it's cleaner. And I think we probably will have that conversation here in a few minutes when we talk about the UPWP. So I'll just wait a second. Sorry, I have a catch in my throat. Anyway,
all right. Any other comments on this one? All right, if not, we've got item 3 under 8B on funding deficit on UPC 110987, Route 208, Route 636, Hood Hauser Drive, intersection improvements. Paul, are you online?
I am. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So what I want to briefly talk about is there's a existing Smart Scale Round 2 project, UPC 110987, from Smart Scale Round 2, which we just found out has a deficit. The original project cost was $5.15 million. VDOT informed us at the end of April that the cost estimate had risen to $6.3 million. The reason for the cost estimate had nothing to do with the change in scope. There was a stormwater management issue, and the solution that VDOT came up with basically was a higher cost by $1.15 million. Spotsylvania County has been working with the department to try to find a alternative solution which is less costly. I'm hopeful that we will be able to get there and that it will not be such a large cost increase. And we have a meeting with VDOT to discuss this later this week. And what we're planning to do is to resolve the cost estimate issue with VDOT hopefully by later this month, so we can come back to FAMPO for the June committee meetings with a request for some additional funding, so that this project was rated under CMAQ as well as RSTP funding. Right now, the project just has CMAQ funding on it, and the majority of the funding on the project is actually Smart Scale funding. The project has a June 2022 add date based on the latest VDOT schedule. So for the funding, it would need more near-term funding. Also with CMAQ, there isn't a lot of near-term funding. The estimates I've seen are basically less than $200,000. So basically, if there's a solution to fund this, it would probably also involve STBG and RSTP funding. So that's basically what we know today. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board? All right, Marcy, do you want to chime in on this in any way?
Sure. So the increases aren't just because of the stormwater management. We had actually looked at two different types of stormwater management during the design. The increases are really because we have more information. You know, the Smart Scale application goes in with a Google map, if you will, or Google Earth. Now we actually have the survey and information like that. Also, construction prices have increased. So there's not one specific item that's made this increase. And yes, we are going to be working with the county to see where we can reduce costs. We don't think we'll be able to get it back down to the original budget, but we hope to be able to at least decrease it somewhat.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this? All right, I guess we will be coming back on this at our next meeting. Should be a long June meeting. Okay, we will move on to 8C, approval of amended resolution 2030, directing a public comment period for the draft 2045 long-range transportation plan, amendment and draft air quality conformity analysis report. Adam, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this process has been on hold with our 2045 LRTP amendment since early April. Part of what we needed was the TAC to be able to meet in April so that they could approve the draft conformity report before a public comment period. And as such, the original resolution 2030 had specific dates for us to start the public comment. And since we weren't able to do that, we're asking for a motion for this amended resolution 2030, which has new dates for a public comment period that would start on May 20th in 2 days.
All right, any questions from the board? So it's basically an administrative change to get us back in compliance. Chair will entertain a motion. Don't everybody jump at once.
Move for approval, Withers.
Do I have a second?
Second, Yakubowski.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing that, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, please state your name. Any abstentions, state your name. All right. Item D, approval resolution 2033, amending the FY 1821 TIP to add a UPC from the I-95 corridor study. Adam.
So this is a TIP amendment request that we received from VDOT, I believe back in March, and this is for some operational improvements that are coming out of the I-95 corridor study. This has been approved by the TAC earlier this month and was endorsed by the CTAC last week. So if there's any specific questions related to any projects, I'd be happy to entertain those with some assistance from VDOT if possible.
All right, any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Shelton?
Yes, sir. We received some questions from one of our constituents about the $59 million that was added, and specifically asking for an explanation around the UPCs 11, 66, 56, and 51. Can VDOT provide some information about those two new UPCs?
Sure. So 116, which two was it?
Thank you. It's UPC 116656 and 116651.
51. All right. I'd have to see. Okay, good. Adam's bringing them up.
Thank you.
So this one, 56 is variable speed limits. You have to keep in mind that these 12 UPCs, these are the UPCs that the CTB added to the 6-year plan back in January. And these are the operational improvements for the I-95 corridor that goes throughout the entire state. So these are not specific to Fredericksburg district. These are the whole corridor, and we have not really started scoping these any further than what was scoped in the corridor study. So we won't necessarily be using every single one of these, but this particular one is for variable speed limits along the 95 corridor, and we have not nailed down where or if any are valid within the Fredericksburg district. The study talks about them being from, I think, the Hanover County line to about exit 130, but we would have to study that a little bit more to see if they really would work in that area. And then the other one, which was the other one, Adam? 51? 51 is the CCTV program. So that's to put up more cameras and things like that. We have not really nailed down the locations of those areas. Those would be placed again at our areas where they're high accident areas or where we need eyes on the road. So those have not been scoped out yet either.
Was that also recommended by the CTB?
Yes, these were all added to the 6-year plan by the CTB in January, and they were all recommended along the corridor in the I-95 corridor study that was mostly completed back in January. If you remember, the CTB added the operational projects. They did not add any capital projects because they wanted to wait for the I-64 corridor study to be complete in order to determine how to best use the other interstate money that came out of the I-81 legislation.
That's right. I forgot that part. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? All right, Chair will entertain a motion on Resolution 20-33. Anybody?
I'll make a motion for approval. Shelton.
Okay, second.
Second, Withers.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, state your name. Any abstentions, state your name. All right. Move on. E, approval of Resolution 20-34, approving the FY 21-24 Transportation Improvement Program. Stacy, I believe this is yours.
Yeah, so before you vote to approve the fiscal year 21-24 TIP today, I need to mention the outcome of the public comment period. You all were emailed a couple weeks ago the public comment period report, and so I've had time to review the 30 public comments we received on the TIP. In that report was also polling results which captured the public's top transportation priorities, and they are briefly to increase sidewalk and bike paths, to improve safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and cars, to improve the FRED service, and to improve rail service. With these public priorities in mind, FAMPO staff have determined that in comparison to the fiscal year 21 TIP, that while the TIP includes projects that will contribute to fulfilling all of the public's priorities, overall the TIP does not prioritize FRED or rail improvements. So, Mr. Chairman, if there are any questions, I will take them regarding the public comment period feedback. And if not, I'll turn the mic back over to you for discussion and action on the fiscal year 21-24 TIP.
Any questions from the board first, and I'll make some comments after staff or anybody on the policy committee has any comments. If not, the only two comments I'd make, and we had this discussion with the GWRC meeting, and we might want to carry it over. I know there's been a lot of conversations about public transportation and FRED, and we are inviting the new director. We have a new director for FRED coming in, and we feel it's appropriate for her to come to the GWRC board and probably the FAMPO board to discuss planning for future development of the FRED system. And there's also some discussion at the GWRC level of, now that there's care funding being put towards transit, how does that interact with the current funding levels that these organizations get normally from us? And that was brought up, and the GWRC board wants to talk about it, and I would assume that's something that the FAMPO policy committee might want to talk about also. That's one. Two, train issue, of course, needless to say, unless something really derails the Long Bridge project, we're pretty much moving forward on that one anyway. So I think we've got that pretty well covered. Having said that, any other comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Ms. Shelton. I talked to staff, our staff, Stafford staff, last week about the CARES Act related to FRED, because I noticed there was a report that Bright, which is another small transit system that's in the Richmond area, ended up being completely fully funded for the year through the CARES Act. And one of the statements they made is that because they were fully funded, they are not requiring their jurisdictions to pay in their normal amount. So I had asked our staff to look into that to see what that was going to look like with FRED. Is that along the same lines as what your GWRC discussion was about?
Yes, ma'am. There was a question about how all this funding comes together and how it works. So
Okay.
that is already on the GWRC agenda, and I will assume that we will also want to have that conversation at FAMPO.
All right, thank you, sir.
All right, any other comments on this one? All right, Chair will entertain a motion on 2034. Going
So
once,
moved.
going twice. Moved by Tim. We've got a second.
Shelton, second.
And Shelton seconds. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by stating name. Any abstentions? All right. We've got that. Move on to item F, I believe. Approval of resolution 2035 endorsing the air quality conformity determination for the fiscal year 2021 through 24 TIP. Adam, you're back on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this document spells out whether or not the project list for the FY 21-24 TIP meets air quality requirements. And so if you'd like to read through that, it is in this document here, the Regional Conformity Report, marked final, April 2020. And Resolution 2035 asks for endorsement of that conformity determination.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, this is Dave McLaughlin. I just say that the CTAC did agree to approve this.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. All right. Chair will entertain a motion on 2035. Don't everybody jump at once.
So moved. Jack
All right. Do I have a second?
Weathers, second.
With seconds. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Do we need to talk the conformity determination tip, Adam, or is that pretty much covered in what we just talked about?
No, that was covered.
Okay. All right. G, GWO Ride Connect fiscal year 21 work plan. Kate?
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Kate Gibson with the George Washington Regional Commission. I oversee the GW Ride Connect program, which I think most of you are familiar with. We're the transportation demand management program operated by GWRC, serving the whole region. We help area commuters find alternate modes of transportation to take to work. And so our work actually reduces over 60,000 vehicle miles traveled each day by getting people into carpools, van pools, encouraging them to take transit and other modes. So before you tonight is the GW Ride Connect work plan for the GW Ride Connect support program, which you all annually fund with an off-the-top CMAQ allocation of $125,000 a year. As you can see from the table of contents, the work plan kind of gives an overview of all of the different program components that are supported by this grant. So basically, the funding that you all provide annually to us helps support our basic operations. So all of our commuter assistance services that we provide, promotion of transit options, our assistance that we provide to van pools and carpools, and let's see, some other things like participation in the Van Pool Alliance, and that's the program that generates the 5307 funding for the community. We generate over $1.2 million a year in 5307 funding. And then also marketing community outreach to make sure folks are aware of our program and our services, leasing commuter parking spaces, and also supporting some other community efforts like working with Fred and Healthy Generations and things like that. At the very bottom is the budget. So the $125,000 off the top allocation will support salaries, fringe benefits, and indirect costs, a little bit of marketing, and then also a small portion for travel and training for our staff. So that's the breakdown of how that money would be used, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from staff? Or excuse me, any questions from the board? All right, thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
All right, we now have H, FY21 Unified Planning Work Program Draft, Adam and Mr. Rich Denbo of Cambridge Systematics. Adam, I'll let you lead.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple highlights here for our FY21 UPWP. So staff has worked with Cambridge over the last 4 or 5 weeks to develop this draft for your review. This document essentially spells out all of our planned activities for FY21, many of which are ongoing planning activities, and some of which are carryover from FY20. We did not attempt to create a massive overhaul of this document, so it largely follows the same form and structure of the FY20 documents. Some of the major updates do include separating out transit and TDM at Fred's request a couple weeks ago. Also at the tax request, we are looking to utilize significantly less STBG funding for staffing in FY21. And at VDOT's request, we also broke down each of the STBG funded work items separately from the typical budget table. So I'll sort of quickly breeze through the document here, and as I do that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? I'm good. Let me jump in. Marcy, I'm going to put you on the spot. You know, VDOT was kind of a driving force in getting us to make some changes to UPWP. Have you guys had an opportunity to take a look at this and give me your VDOT's comments on this?
Well, we just got the final document when the agenda was sent out on Friday. So we have done a cursory review, and we intend to have comments to Adam by next week.
Anything big jumping out, or is it mostly smaller?
Yeah, no major issues. We're just little few comments here and there.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to. Is that Cindy? Is that you?
Mr. Chair, Are we going to get a chance to review this with VDOT before our next meeting? Because I had a long list of questions and I don't want to drag everybody through it. So I just make a comment today that I want to talk to Marcy about some of my questions, comments, and concerns, and I'll set up an offline discussion with that. And if I need to bring you into that or the policy committee in, I will.
Well, why don't you go ahead and have it Marcy and have Adam present so Adam can understand too what's going on. I think we need to have staff in the room for that conversation also. But no, I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We'll make it happen.
All right. Okay, approval resolution 2036 directing a public comment period for the draft fiscal year 2021 Unified Planning Work Program. Chair.
So the new UPWP. Sorry, Mr. Chair, just wanted to chime in quickly to mention that the UPWP approval does require a 30-day public comment period. And with the fiscal year coming to a close here shortly, about a month and a half away, we do need to get that 30 days in. So we are not by any means treating the initial draft UPWP that you have before you tonight as final, but we are looking for this committee to direct us to hold a public comment period starting this Wednesday.
I understand. So we have a resolution for us, 2036. Pleasure of the board. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to move for public comment. Shelton.
All right, second.
Second, Withers.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? State your name. Any abstentions? All right. Amended draft. Adam, you pretty much covered that?
No, this is actually a separate item.
No, okay, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So one thing that is required, so part of our budget for the FY21 UPWP involves a deprogramming request that we submitted to VDOT a couple weeks ago, where basically, typically PL funds, which are the sort of standard planning funds that NPOs use for staffing, typically they would carry over automatically 2 years out. So anything unused this year, which is a quite significant amount based on our projections, mostly due to the fact that we have had no senior level staff since early December, and we did not hire a modeler this year. There's quite a bit of funds that can be carried over. Under certain circumstances, what an MPO can propose to do, if approved by the TAC and the policy committee, is a deprogramming request, where instead of those funds automatically going 2 years out, they would just carry over to the next year directly. And so what we have attempted to do here with this first amendment to the FY20 UPWP is take that projected excess amount of PL funds and apply it directly to FY21. And so what we've done, the only thing that we've updated in this document is the funding table, which is proportional to the original numbers that were in the approved UPWP for FY20, and we've knocked it down by that amount that is in the deprogramming request. So in total, between federal, state, and local shares, there's about $140,000 that we're looking to move from FY20 to FY21. And as such, that does require a UPWP amendment, which is why this is before you tonight. So we are looking for a motion for the resolution 2037 to allow us to hold a public comment period on this proposal.
All right, any questions from the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and this kind of goes back. This kind of goes back to the questions I had at the GBC meeting and this one, that I think the board needs to see all of these funds and determine if that's where we want to allocate that money, vice automatically moving it forward.
Noted, and it will be our discussion at the next meeting. All this does is get the public comment period started so we can have that discussion on whatever we end up deciding to do.
When is this due?
I just have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Shelton?
On the PL number, does the carryover include the 10% local match, or has that already been pulled out?
The carryover amount that we were required to request for the deprogramming is only the federal and state share. So we would handle the 10% local match kind of internally to move that over to match those funds for FY21.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, do I have a second?
Withers.
Seconded by Mr. Withers. Any further discussion? Again, we will have a discussion regarding the disbursement of these funds at our next meeting. All right, if no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, state what name.
McLaughlin, no.
McLaughlin, no. Okay, any abstentions? All right. Move on to item J, FAMPO meeting schedule update. Adam?
So we do have just a quick update for the committee where we are looking at all of the required action items as of right now for the rest of this fiscal year. And given that we just have a month left and we lost our April meeting, of course, due to COVID-19, what we've sort of attempted to do here is, in a concise way as possible, spell out what the required action is by this committee as well as the TAC over the next month and a half. And if you recall from 3 of the action items in this meeting tonight, there are a few public comment periods that we're looking to start this Wednesday that will run concurrently. And due to the timing of the June policy committee that is already scheduled, June 15th, that does not quite get us over that 30-day period. And so what we're proposing to do is ask this committee to meet and convene on June 22nd, simply to approve these documents and have that further discussion that we've talked about tonight. So this is sort of a proposed schedule. It's a little bit just of a heads up that we will need to have a special policy committee in June on the 22nd.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions? All right, hearing none, we will move forward accordingly. Item K, fiscal year 2021 election of officers update. Stacy? Stacy, are you still with us? All right.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a reminder that officer elections are in June, and you will find stipulations for officer elections in your bylaws. The bylaws are on the policy committee homepage, and you may want to discuss about a virtual voting procedure if we're still doing this come June. CTAC has already started to begin thinking out different ways that they might vote virtually.
I think in the future, I just had a PRTC and VRE board meetings, and pretty much everything's done by roll call vote. It takes a little bit longer, but I think it's a little bit more effective and better to document when we take roll call votes, and I'd like to do that in the future. Any other comments? I'm assuming that we will do the standard rotation for officers, unless anybody's got an issue with that. So I guess Stafford would take the chair, Spotsy would be vice chair, and then Fredericksburg would carry up the rear. So if at all possible, I'm assuming the players that are currently in place will continue to move up, but that's a decision of obviously the boards of supervisors and the city council. So just let us know sooner rather than later so we can get that out of the way at the next meeting. Any other comments or questions on that item? All right, correspondence. Adam, anything earth-shattering in correspondence?
Nothing earth-shattering, but a few quick updates here. We did get written confirmation that the CTB did approve the request from FAMPO to move from category A to B for smart scale round 4. We also received some written confirmation as far as policy committee membership for VDOT and Fred. So you'll find that in correspondence. And then lastly, we have 2 letters of support on behalf of FAMPO that Mr. Kelly has signed over the last couple of weeks, supporting the Stafford County and the Spotsylvania build grant applications for this year. So those will be in your correspondence.
All right, thank you. Staff and agency reports, anything?
Also, just a couple quick hitters here. We did a study over the last couple of weeks regarding changes in transportation habits here in the Fredericksburg region that Stacy has done a really good job putting together. So the results of that survey are in here, which are pretty interesting. We also have a news release that Dr. Millsaps referred to in the GWRC meeting, where a few of our staff looked to effectively quantify the drop in VMT and congestion since the stay-at-home order was put in place by the governor. We also have, after that, our FAMPO Quarter 3 UPWP report. So this is what details all of our activities and expenditures over the third quarter for FY20. So feel free to take a look at that. And then also just wanted to mention, as Dr. Millsaps did in the GWRC meeting, that Matthew Decatur, our FAMPO intern, has his last day at FAMPO this Friday. He's been with us since September and done a great job, and he is moving on to another PDC in his first full-time role. So we congratulate Matthew for his new position.
Okay. Quick question to Marcy, put you on the spot. Our quarterly reports, is VDOT happy with our quarterly reports now in the format?
I'm going to have to defer that to Michelle, and she's online.
Michelle? Is Michelle around? If not, Marcy, can you just send us an email?
No,
to
I'm here.
Linda?
Can you hear
Oh,
me?
you got it? I'm sorry.
I got it. I had a problem getting unmuted. I apologize.
That's all right.
Yes, we have been, the format has been good. We've been having a few comments back and forth with Adam on a few things that I think will get worked out with the next update of the UPWP on the percentages and the money and matching some things up a little closer. But I think we're getting to in a good place and in a good groove with that. So we appreciate the hard work that they've been putting into the reports. And we've been sending those on to central office and to FHWA, and we have not received any comments back that we're aware of yet.
Okay, well, Adam, you and your staff, great work. Keep it up. I know this was a bit of a bugaboo for a while, but now we seem to have gotten through that aspect of things. So thank you for all your work on that. Board and member comments. Any member of the board have a comment?
Good luck
Mr.
on your
Chair,
election tomorrow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Marcy. Just wanted to let everybody know that Thursday night we are having a Pardon Our Dust meeting for the Chatham Bridge project. So the contract has been awarded, and it'll be a YouTube live event, and you'll be able to type in any questions that you have, and they'll be answered there. It'll all be recorded, so if you can't make it, you can watch it later, but that's at 7 o'clock on Thursday night.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a closed session to go into. I'm going to read the motion, and if somebody can make the motion and Yes.
Mr. Chair, before you do that, if I might, just a moment, personal privilege. I have that I will send to you both the policy committee and the GWRC board, kind of where everybody is with their census stuff. And I apologize, I failed to mention that at GWRC, but the answer is all jurisdictions are above the national average, and 4 of the 5 jurisdictions are above the state average in terms of their response rate. And it does matter to FAMPO because that is the basis of the PL and the 5303 funding. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Thank you for all the jurisdictions in participating. All right, we will now move into closed session. The members, never forget. Do we have the actual resolution? Somebody there? I do not have the resolution in front of me.
Whereas the policy committee, it's showing.
You got
up.
it? All right, got it. I'll read it and somebody can make the motion in a second. Whereas the policy committee desires to adjourn in closed session for discussion, consideration, and interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of FAMPO, specifically the administrator and staff assigned by the George Washington Regional Commission Executive Director to carry out the Urban Transportation Planning Program. I move that FAMPO go into closed session pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing issues related to personnel.
Second.
Can I have a motion? I need a motion first.
Okay. Well, you read the motion.
Well, chair can't make motions, so you've.
Okay, then I move.
Moved. Billy second. All right. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Can we take the meeting off of public? Because I think we've got everybody here. We need to be here.
Yeah, I think we'll need to have some folks bid
Yeah,
us
we need some,
adieu.
yeah,
So
policy
if you are
committee
not,
only on this one.
This is Stacy. I'm watching people as they leave right now. We still have several folks just starting to log out, so give them 1 second.
I'm assuming, Mr. Kelly, you would like me to stay for at least a portion of this. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Because you've basically been having the conversations with some of the people involved, so.